Hello there everybody, and welcome to my video explaining over my first build I've made for Dark Souls 3, a Soul level 100 high faith build. Let's get started by showing you my stats. So as you can see, I'm not actually level 100 yet, but I'm very close now. The 4 more levels I'm going to be investing into Vigor, so that'll be at 32 for the final build. Speaking of Vigor, let's go over my stats. 32 Vigor. Vigor is self-explanatory, it gives you HP, the more you have the better. I had to make a little bit of a sacrifice to Vigor by, I could have it all the way up to 40, maybe have a potential 200 more health if I leveled up some more. However, with this high faith build here, to really maximise my damage, I had to make lack of survivability. So my Vigor is only going to be at 32, which is still pretty decent, but of course it could be higher. Moving on to my attunement. My attunement's going to be at 30. The 5 attunement slots is very nice. But more importantly, it gives me a high focus point bar, which will let me use sunlight spears very often. Usually after buffing, I can still pull off 3 sunlight spears with the poise boost off my sunlight talisman. So it lets you get off a lot of sunlight spears before having to Ashen Estus up. And also you get the 5 attunement slots too, which is also very handy. Attunement works really well with a high intelligence or faith because you're going to be using spells if you're a pure spellcaster and not just some, dex or strength faith hybrid just for the buff. If you're going pure spellcaster or, spell sword with actual spells, you're going to need a decent attunement so you can throw some spells around without having to Ashen Estus after every single spell. Moving on to my endurance, 18. This is going to be the final value for it. Not much else to say for that really. I mean, it's quite low for endurance compared to many other builds out there, which could screw me over. However, the thing is, I think the stamina regeneration is more important than your total stamina, especially when you're using a very light weapon that doesn't need to swing too much, unless you're one of them R1 spammers who can spam 10 times in a row. Players can catch you out for that. They can just throw knives at your face. If you're only attacking once or twice with a straight sword, you don't exactly need a high stamina value in the first place, because you can swing the thing bloody 4 times with this amount of stamina and still roll out a couple of times very safely. Very low stamina cost, very low upkeep, do not need a very high endurance. So that is the main dump stat I have, and that is why. Vitality, don't need to invest into it at all. I started as a Cleric class, and I didn't really see the point of leveling up, especially seeing as poise is supposed to be broken right now. In fact, it's in the game, but it hasn't been enabled for some reason. They just didn't enable poise. Maybe because it would have been imbalanced, I can imagine getting screwed over by heavy builds, just not really caring about my straight sword attacks, but I don't know. I really wish poise would be a thing, but not to a overpowered extent, it'd have to be a thing you invested into. But I digress, I'm sidetracking here. With 7 vitality, I can use my light straight sword along with a couple of talismans and wear some stylish and protective armour and still be fine. So that's why I only have 7 vitality, and I needed the points elsewhere anyway. Strength, 12. I'm a cleric, I had to have 12 strength. If you're going through PvE content, 12 strength also lets you use a 100% physical block shield in the form of the kite shield. Very useful for when fighting rats and dogs, but really in a PvP scenario I don't like using it because I don't see the point of parrying. I'm not using a high critical weapon. I am a spellcaster, I mix it up with spells, I don't mix it up by trying to parry you. That seems like more of a dex or even a strength thing, but not a spellcaster style of play, at least my way of play. So that's why strength and dexterity as they are. I leveled up Dex twice to get to 10, just to use the Astora's straight sword. Intelligence, 7. I'm not a sorcerer. Intelligence doesn't help me at all for my faith scaling, so no point in leveling up. Pretty easy to explain that. 60 faith. Yes. I think the point at where faith starts to slow down in its scaling is at 40. But it still gets decent scaling all the way up until 60. I'm pretty sure it's okay from then onwards still. It's not terrible. You still get a lot of, bang for your buck when you level up above 60, but you're getting less and less and less. And there's got to be a point where you stop leveling that up because, your health's going to be 100 and your stamina is going to be at like 80, you know. You've got to know when to stop. And with 60 faith, your sunlight spears will chunk the enemy, and I will go over that later when I explain my equipment. And luck 13, Cleric starts with it. It's a dump stat, doesn't do anything to help us in PvP. There's no curse in PvP, and we're not using a bleed or poison weapon, so it's a dump stat. Simple as that. Alright, now we're done with that. Let's move on to our weapons. So starting off with here, we have the Raw Restorer Sword plus 10. It is a straight sword, very much like all other straight swords in the game in regards to its moveset. But the unique thing about this sword here is it's a great candidate for the Raw infusion. It requires 12 faith to wield in the first place, despite not having any lightning scaling. But the icing on the cake is that its strength and dexterity scaling are not very good, but in return you get a very high raw damage value and only need 10 strength and dexterity to use it in the first place. So for the minimal amount of stat investment, you can get a really, really high damaging straight sword with 322 base physical damage at plus 10, despite having no scaling whatsoever. Very, very good candidate, very light weapon as well, very fast weapon, great for buffing. Very, very good weapon if you're looking for any kind of buff build, especially faith ones, because you do need that 12 faith to use it in the first place. Yoshika's time plus 10. I know I butchered that, but for some reason I can't seem to say it. 247 spell buff. What else is there to say? You need to have this chime all the time in order to buff up your weapon with the most damage possible off of Dark Moon Blade or Lightning Blade. It's necessary. S scaling of faith requires 30 faith to use in the first place. You get it from killing the leader of the Dark Moon Blades. However, you want to make sure you'll get yourself the Dark Moon Blade Miracle before you kill her to get this chime. If you're looking for something else to use up until that point, try the Saint's Talisman. You still get 242 spell buff out of it. You get it right near the start of the game. It's not that much lower. But yeah, Yoshika's Time, the best scaling faith apparatus in the game. Use it to buff up your weapon. Maybe throw some lightning spears of it if the enemy is out of range, but let's go over what happens if your enemy is up close. Sunlight Talisman. As you can see, the spell buff value on it is feeble compared to Yoshika's Chime. I think I got it right that time. However, it has a very important ability to it, which I just unequipped it there, didn't mean to do that, but you get Unfaltering Prayer, which will let you temporarily increase your poise whilst casting, preventing enemy attacks from interrupting prayer. This is very important if you plan to surprise your enemy with a Sunlight Spear to the face. Oh, you're right near your enemy? Throw a Sunlight Spear. They attack you, you poise through it, they receive Sunlight Spear to the face. You had a good trade overall. Very, very decent chime if your enemy is silly enough to think they can interrupt your cast whilst you're holding this talisman. Although Saint's Talisman does have the same ability as the Sunlight Talisman and has a much higher spell buff value to it, there is a certain frailty to this talisman which undermines the steadfastness granted by this skill. You might be able to tank one light hit whilst using the poise ability on this talisman. However, with the Sunlight Talisman, this seems to give you a lot of poise and make it extremely difficult for enemies to interrupt your attacks whilst casting. You might be invincible. I haven't done enough testing yet. Maybe in a gank scenario you could be interrupted, but it seems like it's impossible to bloody flinch you whilst using a miracle here. So that's why Sunlight Talisman is on the backup here. Let's just equip that again. And I will equip this talisman during the fight for when I throw Sunlight Spears. It may do less damage, but it still hits for a lot. 203 spell buff is still nothing to sneeze at. And that poise ability is invaluable if you're looking to use any miracle during the fight, but need that insane value of poise you get from casting said miracle. So I buff up with Yoshika's Chime, and then move on to use Sunlight Spears with the Sunlight Talisman. Alright, that about covers it for equipment here. Sometimes I will use a Kite Shield for PvE content, however this is mainly describing my PvP build. But, just to quickly go over it, I do have a Kite Shield here which I use in PvE scenarios. I might have to unequip some armour, because it does weigh a bit. But, with 12 strength, you can use 100% block shield in the form of the Kite Shield to block stuff like dogs and rats, seeing as you can't seem to poise through their attacks, and it can be very, very annoying when you get grouped up on. That's what the Kite Shield's for. Not for PvP though. I don't see the point in parrying when we have Sunlight Spears instead. So next we shall be moving on to our rings. Starting off with here, we have the Sage's Ring. It shortens spell casting time. I'm using this ring because we only have 10 dexterity, and that is the only stat that boosts your spell casting speed. But when you have the Sage's Ring on here, it seems like basically you don't need any dexterity whatsoever to still be a decent caster. It's nice that dexterity does give you casting speed. I suppose it helps hybrid builds out because they won't need this ring then. But for a pure caster build, or this is basically a pure caster build if you think about it, you really need to have the Sage's Ring in order to viably cast spells in the middle of a fight. My Sunlight Spears would probably hit much less if I didn't have this ring and I didn't have a high dexterity stat. So moving on, the Lingering Dragon Crest Ring extends the length of spell effect. It gives me a 30% boost, not the +1 and 2 variants. The +2 variant I think gives you a 40% boost to your spell duration, but even with the +0 variant here, it gives me an extra 18 seconds on top of the 60 seconds for my Dark Moon Blade buff. And that is basically crucial. You need that extra length on your spell buff if the fight's going to be drawn out for a long time. Sometimes the fights may go quickly, but for them longer fights, especially when you have those opponents who are trying to zone out your buff and just dodge you for over a minute, it's very useful to have that extra duration to keep your foes on your toes. And hey, if they're playing super passively, you might be able to pull off a buff in the middle of the fight and reapply that duration. You can reapply a buff in the middle of a fight, even if you still currently have the buff on your weapon. You can just refresh the duration. But yeah, them extra 18 seconds is pretty vital. Chloranthy Ring. It's a very good ring for PvP. Everyone knows this. Extra stamina recovery speed. If you end up using all your stamina on rolls or hits, you can get very screwed over. This stops that happening and helps you recover your stamina a lot faster. I bet everyone's going to be using this in their PvP builds. It's just such a valuable ring to have. It gives you so much more stamina recovery. I didn't know what I'd do without this ring. I mean, I played through the entire game basically without this ring, but now I have it, I realise it's actually like extremely useful to have, and I didn't know what I did without it. You need to have this ring for most builds, I believe. Ring of the Sun's Firstborn. Now this is a one that you can argue either way for. I'm not sure if it's the best ring to have, but to be honest, for a caster build, if I want to be hitting hard with those Sunlight Spears, I need to have this ring on. These rings do not actually boost the amount of damage you receive on your weapon buff, so we're only gaining benefit to our Sunlight Spears here by wearing this ring. Gives us a 20% boost to damage, which is a lot, and seeing as Sunlight Spears are an integral part of the build and a viable strategy during PvP fights, that 20% extra damage is a lot and very useful to have. So that is why I'm running this Ring of the Sun's Firstborn. It doesn't help our buff, but we're not a hybrid build. We are actually casting spells in the middle of the fight in order to trick out our opponents and deal some really high damage if they actually get hit. So that about covers the rings. Now I'll be moving on to the currently equipped miracles we have and why I use them. So let's go and do that. Starting off with here, I actually have these miracles in a very specific order for a good reason. Sunlight Spear. This will be my go-to miracle during PvP fights, at least duels. I may mix up my miracle loadout for the sake of invasions, but for the sake of duels, it seems like Sunlight Spear is sadly one of the only miracles that seem to be viable to pull off in PvP matches. It requires 40 faith to use, which is fine because we have 60. Costs 60 focus points to cast, but it does a lot of damage and casts very fast. Very good for punishing slow weapon players who think they can follow up to one of their slow attacks that you dodge. You can really punish them for going into that slow animation. As well as being able to cast Sunlight Spears with the increased poise, the Sunlight Talisman, in order to have a very favourable trade with a katana user or just a fast weapon user who thinks they can interrupt your cast. Very good miracle, only uses one slot up, costs a lot of focus points, but thanks to our 30-point investment into attunement, we have plenty of focus points to cast these Sunlight Spears. Dark Moon Blade. What faith build would be without a miracle to imbue our weapon? I suppose there are imbuements that you could just go for a lightning imbuement, but I tried playing around with that, and it seems like an infused weapon of lightning just doesn't seem to cut the ice when it comes to overall damage. I tried having a lightning Lothric sword plus 10, but it required 18 dexterity to use it in the first place. It did have S scaling with Faith when it was at plus 10, however, the damage just wasn't anywhere near the grounds of a Dark Moon Blade or Lightning Blade buffed Raw Restorer sword. And seeing as we have so many focus points anyway, it's not too difficult to constantly keep an upkeep on our Dark Moon Blade buff, so yeah, that's why I chose to go for buffing our weapon over using an infused weapon. It just seems better, especially in a PvP scenario, where you get to buff up once before the fight. Great heal. I didn't really use this in PvP scenarios. It'll be more useful during invasion, seeing as we can get more heals off if we escape a gank scenario, if we get put down low on health. Great heal will always heal us up to full based off our extremely high faith stat. And it uses focus points instead of them crucial Estus, which you might need later on in the fight if you're invading. I don't usually use it during PvP duels, but to be honest, I don't really want to find any other miracles that I could use in Great Heal's place. I think you can apply a body buff along with Tears of Denial. I'm not sure if that's a glitch at the moment, but I think you can do that. It gets rid of the visual effect, but Tears of Denial will still work. But I will go over why I'm not doing that very soon. And again, things like Divine Pillars of Light and Life Hunt Scythe are just not very good. Dorf's Ignoring. None of them seem to be that great in the middle of a PvP match, at least in terms of viability for aggressive miracles. Tears of Denial. Tears of Denial. What can I say about it? It's OP. Why does it have a 15 faith requirement? I feel like every build's going to end up using this in the future. It is so powerful. It lets you take one extra hit. If there are enough smart players out there, they'll be purposely equipping themselves against this by either having a bow equipped or some throwing knives equipped, because it does save your life, but only saves your life on 1 HP. I would be using something like Sacred Oath instead of Tears of Denial, seeing as we can afford to use Sacred Oath. But to be honest, in a duel scenario, I don't like being that guy who has to body buff and weapon buff up. It seems a little bit rude wasting their time. You're like, oh, give me like 10 minutes to buff up with my Sacred Oath and my Dark Moon Blade. I would use it. It does give attack and damage absorption, and it's very nice. It also uses 2 slots. But the thing is, it just takes so long to cast both buffs. I think it's just sort of rude, and it doesn't help that much. It seems a little bit too try-hardy, so I run away from Sacred Oath. I put on my Tears to Denial as soon as I go into somebody's world, or if I'm hosting, then as soon as I'm, rested at a bonfire. It'll stay active on me until I die in the host's world or in my own world. So at the start of the fight, all I have to do is put my Dark Moon Blade buff on, rather than being that guy, like, wait a minute, I've got to put on all my buffs here. No. I just put on Tears of Denial when I go into their world, put on Dark Moon Blade at the start of the fight, and then throw Sunlight Spears at them during the fight. That is why I have Tears of Denial. Still very, very good, but obviously it does have its counters in the form of stuff like throwing knives and whatnot. But it can be a game changer sometimes. It has saved my life on numerous occasions. That 1 extra hit does matter, especially against strength weapon users. It's a godsend. Well, time to move on to the armour. Wait, you think your actual armour you have on really matters? No, just go for Fashion Souls. This is my Fashion Souls personally. I have the Ragged Mask, Farum Armour, Havel's Gauntlets, and the Cleric Trousers. It really doesn't matter what you wear. It is nice to get close to that 70% because heavier armour does give you increased physical damage absorption values. But really, it's more about the fashion than it is about the looks. And I think personally, the Farum Armour looks very nice, and the pieces of gear we have with it do sort of suit along with it. So that is why we are wearing these particular things. I've always had a bit of a fondness for Havel's Gauntlets. It's just me though, might just be me. Hello there, and welcome to the 5 fight clips I recorded. I basically did 5 duels after recording the previous parts of this video. Turns out I win all 5, spoiler alert, which is kind of amazing. This build isn't exactly OP, at least I don't think, but it turned out going 5 for 5. It didn't do that before, but I guess between a mix of the build and my skill, I managed to do it, so surprising enough. I'm going to be talking over when I feel it deems necessary and just going over, you know, how I use this build when I think it, you know, warrants talking about. So of course that Sunlight Spear there, the opponent wasn't exactly attacking, they saw that coming, they dodged it. That's going to happen most of the time. If you're only going to be using your spells at a range, the opponent will just dodge them. You need to punish your opponent for going into slow attacks or over-dedicating by throwing a spell at them, which is why the Sunlight Talisman is so decent for that. And as you can see right at the end there, I'm kind of glad myself on that one. Just simply mixing up there, like I rolled away after most of them stab attacks, but I went for the follow-up R2 and it caught my enemy out. Skill is also very important when it comes to these builds. You can't just simply copy-paste a build and expect to do well, unless you're using an S-Stock. You've also got to have the skill to use the build, and that's why I like the straight sword so much. It's so versatile in its moveset, you can really catch an enemy off guard. Makes up for its short range by being very unpredictable. And of course I'm going to do my regular start here. Apply Dark Moon Blade with a Chime, bow, and then switch to Sunlight Spear whilst bowing, switch to Sunlight Talisman after. This opponent seemed to be very, very fragile in terms of his HP. That's why I've sacrificed so much Vigor in this build to get that increased HP. I was about to bow there, but I kind of forgot he had Denial as well. I finished him off like that. But yeah, he could have easily, like, you know, brought it back there. As you'll soon see, Denial can be a real lifesaver. But to be honest, that guy really needs some more Vigor for his build. Maybe he's a glass cannon, he didn't hit me very much. It would have been nice to see more of what he had to offer. So for every fight, I Dark Moon Blade up. I don't drink Ashen Estus after Dark Moon Blading up. I take the penalty of using my Dark Moon Blade in the first place. I'm not sure what the etiquette is when it comes to that. You know, do you Ashen Estus right after a buff? I don't really know, but in this case, I take the Estus, chug on the chin, and it still lets me pull off 2 Sunlight Spears, so I really just don't mind. That's the advantage of having so many focus points. And I actually got lucky there, and the opponent didn't manage to dodge my Sunlight Spear, so I got a decent 438 damage. Even with the Sunlight Talisman, you still clip him for a lot of HP. But he did outplay me there with the increased range of the machete. That's a big downside to a straight sword. You don't have that much range, and you can get outranged by them bigger strength weapons. So good play on his part. He really wrecked me with that 2-hit combo. I keep going for jumping attacks because I see he has a parry shield. And he could very easily parry bait me. I don't want to get caught out. He outplays me again, just hits me before I hit him. I go for the risky play of comboing him, and Denial is active as you can see. Denial just triggered. I would be dead at this point, but Denial has saved my life. I throw another Sunlight Spear, just misses him. But I'm not giving up yet. I got 2 decent light hits on him. I'm bringing it back, and I'm trying my hardest. If he had throwing knives in his bar, I'd probably be dead at this point, but I think I got lucky here, and I managed to finish things off. But if he had throwing knives, that would have been over. Tears of Denial, I don't think's OP. You just need to have throwing knives in your hotbar to counteract it. You literally have 1 health at the end of the day, so for those of you who are getting annoyed by people with Tears of Denial, you have throwing knives, everyone can use them, no matter what your scaling is, you're going to do at least 1 damage, so yeah, just pack throwing knives, it's easy enough. I'm only literally using Tears of Denial because the other offensive miracles aren't that great. I've tried using Wrath of the Gods in a duel, as well as Lightning Storm, but they're so slow of a miracle to cast that you just can't viably pull them off in the middle of a match. Sunlight Spear is a fast casting miracle, you can actually punish your opponent for it, but as for stuff like Wrath of the Gods and Lightning Storm. By the way, this had a surprising range that I wasn't aware of, but that did actually clip me there. I didn't think it would have hit me at that range, but that is deceptively a long range on it. But yeah, as I was saying, I wouldn't be using Tears of Denial right now if it wasn't for the fact that the other high faith requirement miracles just aren't that great. So things are going pretty evenly here. Keep getting shockwave by, is that the Black Knight Halberd? Not too sure. Black Knight Glaive. I tried for a lightning spear to punish the attack. I thought he might have gone spin to win there. Well, I went for it. Ashen Estus up. I don't think that's a rude thing to do in the middle of a fight, right? I still like consider etiquette. But there we go. He goes for another spin to win. Hail Mary. But I have Sunlight Spears at the ready and went for the punish. I didn't think he clipped me there, but if he did, I would have poised through it thanks to that Sunlight Talisman. And if I did get clipped there, and I was using the Chime, that could have been the difference between victory and defeat. Although sadly the Sunlight Talisman didn't really help me there. This last fight, I didn't actually rest at the bonfire to fill up my Estus. I didn't rest at the bonfire once during all 5 of these fights. I've just been filling up in between fights. But this comes back to bite me a little bit, because now I may be able to get my Tears of Denial and Dark Moon Blade back. By the way, that last fight I didn't have Tears of Denial. But I'm not going to have any focus points left over in order to use my Sunlight Spear Miracle. So I've got to keep that in mind. So for most of this fight, I'm going like two-hander because, well, it does more damage, of course. I tried switching out to the Sunlight Talisman there with Sunlight Spear, but as you can see, it didn't really do anything because I have not enough focus points left over. But I still make use of that focus point bar. Despite me having not many focus points left, I can still utilise it. I think I almost might have got parried there, but thankfully he has a medium shield. We do a trade there, but a jumping attack does do more damage than a light. Got to keep that in mind. And he keeps trying to trick me out with these rope firebombs, but I'm not falling for it, man. Ooh, he's expecting that follow-up. He could have got me there. You got to be unpredictable in order to counteract parries. And as you can see there with Weapon Arts, if I caught him out of that, he'd probably be dead at this point. Weapon Arts can be very handy. And that double fully charged R2, that delayed timing is so great in PvP to catch your opponents out. And that is going to be it here for the video. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope you enjoyed the build. See you next time.